system. When we talk of the nervous system, what comes inside your mind? Anyone? I want everyone to participate. I want everyone to give me an answer. Okay, sis.
For coordination of our body.
Aside from the coordination, yes, another. Sigmund.
Brain po, ma'am.
The brain. What else? Elijah.
Control po.
Again?
Control po, ma'am.
Yes, control. Okay, Naomi. What
For
else?
transmitting signals po throughout the body po.
Okay, another. Malvin.
Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system po.
Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Who else? Dapat meron kayong idea. Rain, Alisa.
Response to stimuli po.
Response to stimuli. All of your answers are correct. That all involves the nervous system. The way we think, the way when we move, response to stimuli, control of the movement, that everything belongs to the nervous system. It controls everything in our body system. Okay, so the nervous system, you have to look into the to the to the organization of the nervous system. These are group of tissues which is highly specialized, composed of highly specialized cells, and it possesses the characteristic of being excitable, and it conducts stimulus or action potential. So when you say stimulus or action potential, these are the signals, no, chemical, mechanical signals that are perceived or that is being brought by that is being perceived by the sensory receptors, and it's being brought to the brain, and the brain is going to interpret it and brings it back or transmit it back. These signals are transmitted back to the specific organs which needs to perform that particular action. So these are the major functions of the nervous system. It will receive sensory input. That means it will receive information about the environment around us. It integrates information. So it is going to integrate. So once it receives that information, it is going to generate the response to that information. No? So that is why if we see something, like if we see a dog, we feel afraid. What do? Is either we just stand or we run. No? Because the perception of just seeing the dog is already giving a feedback, no? It's already giving that stimulus to the brain, and the brain is going to give the feedback, no? It also controls the muscles and the glands. So we know already remember the neuromuscular junction during the muscular the topic about muscles. Remember the neuromuscular junction where there are signals wherein action potential are transmitted. The vesicles open to release acetylcholine. So remember that. So this is controlling the muscles and the glands, the secretions of the glands. And it maintains also the homeostasis. So it regulates the internal environment. That has to do with the autonomic nervous system. When you say autonomic nervous system, this is the control, the action of the organ systems of the body. Because it needs because we have sensory and motor inputs, sensory inputs and it has to do with motor outputs, and it establishes and maintain mental activity. So these are the major functions of the nervous system. So morphologically, the brain, the central nervous system is divided into two. So we have the brain and the spinal cord, and that belongs to the central nervous system. Okay? So there are two forms of that comprises the nervous system itself. It is the central nervous system, which comprises the brain and the spinal cord, and the next major form or the next major division is the peripheral nervous system, which is further divided into the cranial nerves, which is composed of 12 pairs, the spinal nerves, which is composed of 31 pairs, and the autonomic nervous system. So we were talking about the brain being the nervous system being excitable, being it has the characteristic of conductivity. When you say excitability of the central nervous system, ano ang nauunawaan nyo when you say excitable ang nervous system or nagko-conduct siya? Ano ang nauunawaan nyo? If you say excitable, it has the characteristic of excitability. Anong nauunawaan nyo? Sige, ano just come inside your brain? Andre?
The nervous system respond to stimuli po.
Yes. So it has the characteristic, or it is able to detect, no? It is able to detect an environmental stimulus, and it could respond to that stimulus. So it can get excited, no? When you say conductivity, it pertains to the neurons, the ability of the neurons to be able to transmit or to relay the signals that is getting it from one neuron to another neuron. Nagko-conduct siya ng electrical signals to be able to relay that message or information. Okay? So that is excitability and conductivity of the nervous system. So this is the nervous system. You have here the brain. This is composed by the central nervous system, the brain, and the spinal cord. Okay? And you have the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system, these are the structures outside the brain and the spinal cord. And this is composed of the nerves and the ganglion. Okay? So yun yung composition ng nervous system. You have the central, brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral, ganglion, and the nerves. Okay, the whole thing here that you can see, below, the picture below is a real picture of a brain. The whole thing here, this is the cerebrum. Ito yung tinatawag nating cerebrum. That belongs to the brain. Go ahead. Pero, excuse me, class. Si Rainer, kung I will just go before siya mag-account. Okay. Please. So the whole thing here that you can see on your monitors is the cerebrum. So this is the brain, no? This one below, this is part also of the brain. This is the cerebrum. And this is part of the brain, which is the hindbrain. So the whole thing here, kung titingnan mo yan yung brain. The spinal cord is the one continuous to the medulla oblongata, which is part of the hindbrain. Okay, so there are two functional divisions of the nervous system, namely the somatic efferent and the visceral efferent. When you say efferent, so let's define the terms para mas maintindihan. Para saan, ano yung efferent, Doc? When you say efferent, this is the one that is bringing the signal away, no? Away. Efferent is away from the brain. Okay? So these are the somatic efferent. These are innervating the somatic structures. So somatic structures like the skeletal muscles and the skin. Okay? While visceral efferent, this is the one that will innervate now the visceral or the involuntary structures. So when you say visceral, we are dealing mostly of the internal parts, no, of the body. So when you say efferent, this is the one that is innervating the visceral or involuntary structures like the smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and the glands. And this is now the one that we consider as the autonomic nervous system. Okay? So remember, efferent is away. Okay? So when you say somatic efferent, this is the one that is going to transmit an action potential or the signal from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles and skin. So, galing siya sa brain, dadalhin siya. Siya yung nagtatransmit ng yung action potential or electrical signals from the brain. Okay? Kapag sinabi namang visceral efferent, this is transmitting the action potential or the signal from the central nervous system going to the cardiac muscles, to the smooth muscles, and the glands. So you see, it's going away from the brain. So there are two types of cells which is involved in the nervous system. We have, I think everyone knows what a neuron is, and then we have the neuroglia or the glial cells. When we talk of the neurons, remember the neurons are the active conducting elements. No? And the neuroglia, these are just supporting elements. Okay? The neuroglia, these are just supporting elements. They do not conduct action potentials. So from the two of them, the one that conducts the AP or the action potential is the neuron. Okay? Neuroglia or glial cells, these are only supporting elements. And this is composed of the astrocyte, oligodendrocyte, microglia, and ependymal cells. So what are these cells? So when we talk of the astrocyte, this is the major supporting cell in the central nervous system. Okay? Major supporting cell of the central nervous system, and this is the largest and the most numerous type of the glial cells. It has to do with the homeostasis of the brain. That is the astrocyte. On the other hand, the oligodendrocyte, this is the one that is going to provide an insulating material that is surrounding now the axon. Can you still remember the axon, guys? The axon, can you still remember, which is part of the neuron? Let's go to this picture here. Remember the whole thing here? The whole thing here, yan, that is the axon. Okay? Yan. The whole thing there is the axon, right? The one that insulates, itong material na yan na nag-i-insulate or it covers the axon. Okay? So the one that insulates or the one that covers the axon or that surrounds the axon, this is provided by the oligodendrocyte. Okay? So going back to that, the oligodendrocyte, this is the one that will provide the insulating material that is surrounding the axon. So you call that insulating materials as myelin sheath. Okay? The one that insulates or covers the axon is the myelin sheath. And this is provided by oligodendrocyte or produced by oligodendrocyte. The microglia, this is the immune cell of the central nervous system. So this plays a very important role especially if there is infection, no? Or inflammation, because it helps to clean, no? It helps to clean up the invaders. And then the other one, the last one, is the ependymal cells. Ependymal cells, you can find it lining. These are lining the cavities, the fluid-filled cavities, which are the ventricles and canals in the central nervous system. The ependymal cells, they are responsible for the production of what you call a fluid that you call cerebrospinal fluid, which helps in the protection of the brain against external injury. Kasi this is a fluid eh. So what is the importance there? You see, even if we suddenly move our head, you bump your head, aside from the cranium, aside from the skull that is protecting the brain, aside from the vertebrae that is protecting the spinal cord, you also have there the cerebrospinal fluid, or the CSF, which also protects the brain and the spinal cord. So it has more to do with protection. Okay? And this is produced mainly by these cells lining the ventricles, and these cells are called ependymal cells. Okay? So those are the four supporting elements, and you call them neuroglia, or the glial cells, which are the cells in the nervous system. Okay, so this is a schematic presentation or diagram for you to remember, to understand, and you can find this also in your books. So you have there the nervous system, which is composed of the CNS and the PNS. Okay, so the CNS is composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and then you have the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, which is composed of the nerves. The PNS is further divided into autonomic nervous system. This is including both the sensory and motor, and the somatic nervous system. Under the autonomic nervous system, you have different responses there. And these responses could be sympathetic or parasympathetic. Okay? And then somatic, it could be sensory or motor. Okay? When you say sensory afferent, afferent, it is going towards, no? Afferent, it is going towards. When you say towards, no? Kasi it is perceived by the body going towards the brain. If you say motor efferent, away from efferent. Letter E naman ngayon, no? If you say efferent, away from the brain. So that means there is already a signal coming from the brain, because the information is already what you call it? It's already interpreted by the brain. Okay? What we perceived and is brought to the brain by the sensory afferent, it is now going back as a response away from the brain. So that is the response now would be the motor efferent, particularly the body. When you say soma, from the word itself, somatic, from the word soma, which is the body. So this would be now the response of the body from a particular stimulus coming from the brain. Okay? So when you say afferent, towards, when you say efferent, away. So the neuron is the basic unit of the nervous system, and this is the one that will conduct now the electrical impulses, or when you say electrical impulses, you also say the action potential. Okay? So these electrical impulses or action potential from one part of the body to another, or from one neuron to another neuron. So these are the main parts, and I think we all know this one already when we were talking of the muscular system. You have there the cell body, or the soma, the axon, and the dendrite. So these three are the main parts of the neuron. So remember this picture? Naalala niyo pa ba ito? So the whole thing there, the whole structure on that picture, that is what is that one? Rain. Alisa, I will just be calling you. What is that structure? I'm calling you randomly.
Whole structure po.
Yes, the whole thing there. Ano yan?
Yung whole structure po ng ng nerves.
What is this whole thing there? Ano yan? What do you think?
Structure po ng neuron.
Okay, Julia.
Neuron po, ma'am.
Yes. The whole thing here is a neuron. Yan yung neuron, my dear students. The whole thing there is a neuron. So let's now identify the parts. These are the dendrites. Ito yung mga dendrites. Okay? These are the dendrites. Itong mga parang sanga-sanga dyan. Yun ang dendrites. This is the body. And the one inside is the nucleus. Okay? And the whole thing here, yan, yung makikita mo dyan, yung covered, makikita mo siya covered siya, di ba? That one there, itong part na to, yan, itong parte na to, na tinitrace ko, kung wala siyang covering, ganyan itsura dapat niya, no? And that is the axon. With the covering there, itong naka-cover dyan, what do you call that one? Yes, Naomi.
Oligodendrocyte po.
Again? Naomi?
Oligodendrocyte po.
You call this one, the oligodendrocyte are the cells, okay? The oligo, so do not confuse yourselves. The oligodendrocyte are the cells that will produce this one. So ano tong nakabalot sa kanya? I'd call another one. Gion or Miguel. Kiawot.
Hindi ko lang po sure kung tama yung pag-pronounce ko, ma'am. Myelin sheath? Paano po pag-pronounce to, ma'am?
Myelin sheath.
Myelin sheath. Yan po.
Yes. So, the one that is insulating, okay? Itong nagko-cover dyan, yan ang tinatawag nating myelin sheath, okay? And the cell that produces the myelin sheath is the answer of Naomi. Correct, Naomi?
Yes po.
Okay. So do not confuse, ha? Ang nag-produce ng myelin sheath, si oligodendrocyte. And that is one of the supporting cell of the nervous system. Intindihan now? Okay? So, you have there, this is the myelin sheath now insulating the axon. Kasi ito man yung axon. That is the axon. Okay? So, those are the parts of the neuron. You have there the dendrites, the cell body, and the cell body and the axon. So when you say the cell body, the dendrites, the cell body, so that is already the whole composition of the neuron. Okay, so huwag kalimutan. So you can see in between, nakikita nyo sa picture, in between the myelin, this part here, etong in between that, itong part na ito, in between, you call that, itong mga in between dyan, the space or the gaps, the space or the gaps between myelinated axons, those gaps there, you call it as the nodes of Ranvier. Okay? The gaps between, note it down, the gaps between these myelinated axons, those gaps, you call it as the nodes of Ranvier. Don't take it down because later I will further explain what is that for. Yes. Yes. That That is the same as the neurofibril nodes. You call it also nodes of Ranvier. This is more commonly used as the nodes of Ranvier. Okay. So you see, the neuron, this is the conducting cell, no, of the nervous system. You can also find this one in your book. So the processes that you can find in there, you have the dendrites. So remember, the dendrites, this is the one that is now going, as it receives the impulses from one neuron, it is now going to transmit that impulse towards the cell body. So kapag matanggap ng dendrite yung action potential or yung signal, it's now going to transmit it towards the cell body. And in the cell body, as it is processed there, it's now going to further relay the message or the action potential to be relayed away from the cell body by the axon. Okay? So the one that will transmit impulses towards the cell body would be the dendrite. The process that is going to transmit or conduct the impulses away from the cell body, that will be the axon. Ito yung axon. Okay? So towards the cell body would be the dendrites, away from the cell body would be the axon. So we're talking here of the transmission of signals. Okay. So the point of connection between neurons, when you say point of connection, kung saan sila magmi-meet, that is the junction where the axon of one neuron is going to interact with another neuron. Okay? So yung magko-communicate sila, yun yung tinatawag nating synapse. Synapse there is a point of connection between neurons. And these are very important. In these connections, there are very important neurotransmitters. So remember the neurotransmitters, which helps in the transmission or in initiating the transfer of the signals. Remember from among the three, these are the main neurotransmitters, like the epinephrine, or you call it adrenaline, the norepinephrine or the noradrenaline, and acetylcholine. So from the three, which one is very important for muscle contraction? Yes, Seth.
Acetylcholine po.
Very good. So acetylcholine, did it come out from your exam? In your exam?
Meron po atang isa.
Yeah. So acetylcholine is a very important. So this is one of the main neurotransmitters, which is very important in the contraction of the muscle. No, the epinephrine, on the other hand, this is the one that we call as the adrenaline. Okay, this is involved in the body's fight or flight response. It is a neurotransmitter. Like say for example, di ba pag sinasabi nyo when you are so excited, or even if there is a certain incident that I can still remember, there was a fire that a person is able to lift a very heavy refrigerator to move it out from the house. That is the adrenaline effect. This is the one because adrenaline, that is what I've mentioned, this is the one that is involved in the fight or the flight response of the body. So it's generating now. It will be generated because this is excitatory. This is a neurotransmitter that is excitatory. Okay, so it is exciting the neurons. No, it is exciting. These are exciting the neurons, the junctions, so that the person can perform that particular response, that fight or flight response of the body, and that is conducted by the epinephrine. When you say norepinephrine, this is also another this is another main neurotransmitter, which is produced by a gland, and this is a chemical messenger which will now transmit signals across the nerve endings in the body. Okay, and this is also an excitatory neurotransmitters. So these are the three main neurotransmitters. You have the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. When you say nerve impulse, the term nerve impulse there, these are the electrical signals. We are talking here of the electrical signals or the action potentials. Okay, these are the electrical signals or the action potentials that is passed along the dendrites to that is being generated by that is passed along the dendrites. So you call them nerve impulses. So same lang yan, nerve impulse, electrical signals, or action potentials. These are the signals that is being passed along the dendrites, received by the body, and being transmitted away from the body by the axon. So kung iisipin mo, it's just the same as the signal, action potential or signal, if you hear that word nerve impulse. Okay? So myelin sheath, we already know the myelin sheath. This is the insulating material which is covering now the axons. So remember that the axons in the central and peripheral nervous system, so these are insulating materials. Okay? And this is produced by what cell? Anong cell nagpo-produce, Malvin?
Oligodendrocytes po.
This is produced by the oligodendrocyte. Okay, the transmission of the signal that is coming from one neuron to another neuron that is being transmitted, no? There is what we call as the jumping of signals from one node to another. Kanina, we were talking of this one. Remember this nodes of Ranvier, right? Yung tinatawag nating neurofibril nodes, this one. Okay? The electrical signals can jump from one node to another node in the myelin sheath instead of just continuously traveling. So try to put yourself where you walk or when you jump. Which is faster to reach to a particular place, or when you want to go to you want to reach the door? Ano ang mas mabilis? Yung nagja-jump ka or yung naglalakad ka lang? Sigmund.
Jumping po, ma'am.
Very good. So the jumping there of the electrical impulse from one node to another, that is what you call as the saltatory conduction of impulses. Okay? You call it as the saltatory conduction of impulses. What is that for? This is for the rapid conduction, to facilitate the rapid conduction of the nerve impulses. Mas mabilis ang transmission ng signal if the signal or the electrical impulse is jumping from one node to another. Okay? So mas mabilis siya. And you call it saltatory conduction of impulses. Okay? So, ma-imagine nyo na, maiisip nyo na yung mga conduction ng signal, saan siya galing, or how is it being transmitted. So remember the neurons. No? Remember the oligodendrocyte that is producing the myelin sheath. And in between those nodes covered by the myelin sheaths, you have there the gaps which you call as the neurofibril nodes, or what you call as the nodes of Ranvier. Doon magja-jump yung mga electrical signals to facilitate faster conduction or rapid conduction of those signals. Okay? So, ganon ang pag-transmit ng signals. Okay, let's go back now to the central nervous system. So, the central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. Okay? CNS, brain, and spinal cord. So, this is divided grossly into a gray matter and a white matter. Okay? Kapag sinabi mong gray matter, this is the one. Ito yon. You can find both of these. You can find both of this in the spinal cord and in the brain. The spinal cord you can see it, this one. Oh no, this is the brain, and this is scattered, no? Ito, meron siya. These are the ones here. Itong mga brownish parts na yan. These are the gray matter. Okay? Meron ding gray matter dyan. Scattered kasi sa loob ng brain. So the gray matter there, it looks like gray because because of its appearance. The appearance is grayish because of the presence of the nerve cell bodies and the true dendrites in this part of the brain. Okay? While the white matter, this is the white matter. Makikita mo naman itong part na you say maputi, let's say it that way. Itong part na lighter in color, that is the white matter, which is chiefly composed. Excuse me guys, I'm just sending off my son. Pasensya na ha. Okay, bye-bye. This is my son. I'm going to
No homework for today. No homework.
Excuse me guys, I'm just sending him off because he is leaving today na for abroad.
Use ChatGPT, ha?
Give me just 5 minutes, okay? 5 minutes lang. I'm just sending him off. Okay, guys, I'm back. Okay, so that was my son. Hindi na ako sumama. He's leaving now for Canada because he's living there. Guess what? How old is my son? Mas matanda pa yung anak ko sa inyo, guys. He's 30 years old. Yes, I have a 30-year-old son na. So kayo, para ko na rin kayong mga anak. Kaya pinapagalitan ko rin kayo. Okay, so let us now go back. So what is important here, guys, is for you to understand those structures, to know those structures, to familiarize yourselves with the structures. Na, ay, ito pala yung gray matter, ay, ito pala yung white matter, ito pala yung function ng white matter. So those structures that belongs to the different parts of the nervous system. Yun ang dapat niyong maunawaan. Yung mga definition of terms, yung mga terms that involves in the nervous system. So let us now go back. So central nervous system, it is composed of the what? Brain and the spinal cord. In the brain and spinal cord, there are areas where we call as the gray matter and the white matter. Okay? So the gray matter there, this is the one that is surrounding this darker color, the darker appearance there, is because of the presence of the nerve cell bodies and the true dendrites. So remember, what are the cell bodies? What are the dendrites for? Para saan yan? These are parts of the neurons, di ba? You know that, di ba? These are parts of the neurons. And in the white matter, the white matter there is composed chiefly of myelinated nerve fibers. Okay? This is very important at the white matter because this is for the conduction of the nerve impulses or the signals. So that is the importance there, the conduction of the nerve impulses. Okay? Okay, so in the spinal cord, this one, the H part there, parang siyang letter H. You can see here in the middle, yan. That is the gray matter of the spinal cord. Compared to the brain, this is the brain, that is the brain. You see, this is also the gray matter. So it is scattered. Anatomically, scattered siya. Itong mga brownish parts na yan, itong mga to, yan, the whole thing there, those are the gray matter of the brain. Whereas in the spinal cord, ito lang yung nasa gitna, yung naka-letter H dyan. It looks like a butterfly. That butterfly structure there, that is what you call as the gray matter. Okay. So the brain this is the one that is contained in the skull. This is protected by the skull. This is the most complex and largest mass of nervous tissue, which is composed of billions, literally billions of nerve cells. Okay, so the average weight of the human brain in the adult is approximately 1,380 grams in the male and 1,250 grams in the females. But that doesn't mean na kung mas malaki yung brains ng mga lalaki, that doesn't mean na mas matalino sila sa atin. Do you believe that, ladies? Guys, mas malaki yung brains nila, mas matalino sila? No, I won't believe that. Dapat hindi, no? I'm just kidding, guys. Okay, so, tinatawag women power tayo, magkaisa tayo dito, no? Okay, so this is just the difference. This is just the structure, no? Wherein the male, kaya siguro mas stubborn ang male kaysa female, no? So, anyway, so this varies, no? So, sa male, mas malaki, is heavier compared to the female, which is 1,250 grams. So, mas maliit sa female. Okay. So embryologically, the brain is developed into this is the origin, no? So as a forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. So the brain is going to develop starting as prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombencephalon because it starts as a tube. The brain starts as a tube, like this, para siyang tube. Ganyan lang yan. Okay? And it is divided into different divisions, like the prosencephalon, which is, this is the prosencephalon, this is the mesencephalon, and this is the rhombencephalon. So, the prosencephalon there is the forebrain. Okay? The midbrain there, or the middle brain there, is the mesencephalon, and the hindbrain is the rhombencephalon. So let's go back to this. Okay? So yun yung division niya. Yung kanina pinakita ko sa inyo. So it starts as a neural tube, or as a tube. So yung pinakauna doon, ito yung forebrain, or you call that forebrain as prosencephalon. Okay? Forebrain, prosencephalon. It is now going to develop to become the cerebrum, which is telencephalon, and the diencephalon, which is composed of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, and the subthalamus. Okay? So again, the forebrain, the prosencephalon, will develop to become telencephalon and diencephalon. Under the telencephalon, you have there the cerebrum. Under the diencephalon, you have there the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and the subthalamus. The midbrain is composed, or the midbrain, or mesencephalon, is composed of the corpora quadrigemina, which is the tectum of the brain, which is further composed of 2 superior colliculi and 2 inferior colliculi. And then you have there the cerebral peduncles and the cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, or you call it as ether. So these are the compositions of the midbrain, or the mesencephalon. The hindbrain, the one, yung hind sa likod, it is now going to be divided to become the metencephalon, and this will now become the cerebellum and the pons, and the myelencephalon, which is now the medulla oblongata. Okay? So let us now go. Try to remember those structures. Malala pa ba? Just try to look at your notes, okay? To follow the structure when we talk of this ito. Okay? So ito, the whole, this is the embryo. Ito yung, tingnan mo, ito yung kamay niya. Ma-picture nyo, guys. Nakita nyo, baby yan? That's an embryo, no? So, the brain there, this is the one that is developing. Ito yon. The whole thing here, ito yung tinatawag nating, yan. Yan yung prosencephalon. That is part of the, this is the forebrain. Magdi-develop siya into telencephalon, which will now become the cerebrum. Okay? And then the diencephalon, which will become, siya na yung magiging thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and subthalamus, prosencephalon. Mesencephalon, when you say mesencephalon, ito na yung, it will now become the, the colliculi. It is now going to become the corpora quadrigemina with superior and inferior colliculi. Ito yon, from here to there. Ito yung magiging midbrain. Mamaya ipakita ko sa inyo when it further develops into talagang totoo na I mean really the formed brain. The hindbrain, ito yon. Itong parte na ito. Ito yung hindbrain, which will now be composed of the cerebellum and the pons, which is metencephalon, and the myelencephalon, which is the medulla oblongata. Sila yung mga magiging structures coming from those from these structures, no, embryologic division. So dito, so when it starts to develop, so nakita nyo as a neural tube. So you see, as a tube, magdi-develop siya. Just follow. Yung color coding dyan, ito yung violet, prosen, ito yung mid, ito yung high. Okay? Until it will fully develop to become a brain. So ito, this one, this is the development of the prosencephalon. Okay? Nandyan yung, this will now become the cerebrum. So what is the cerebrum there? That is the telencephalon. Okay? So from this, from the prosencephalon, it will now develop into telencephalon. The telencephalon is the cerebrum itself. Okay? Inside, when you open it up, I just try to find. Okay, inside. Ito, this is an actual brain. You have there the midbrain. Just a moment. Let's go to the midbrain. Para sorry. Just a moment, guys. Okay. So dito, pag nagde-develop yan, so in there, di ba, meron tayong prosencephalon and we have the midbrain, which is the mesencephalon, which is now composed of the corpora quadrigemina. So ito yung makikita mo when you open this up, makikita mo siya sa loob. Yung tinatawag natin na midbrain. The hindbrain now, ito na yung magiging hindbrain. Itong parte na to, which will now be composed of the cerebellum, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So, it will develop that way. Magiging ganun ang division niya when it comes to the brain. Okay? So, again, the prosencephalon, it develops now to become the cerebrum. And then inside, you have there the diencephalon, which is part of the development of the prosencephalon. And this will now become the prosencephalon, the diencephalon. Sandali, dito. Itong part, ito na yung diencephalon. Itong part na to, itong parte na to, this will now be the thalamus. You can, when you open the brain, when you cut the brain into right and left hemisphere inside, ito yung thalamus. Okay, this is the part here is the hypothalamus. Below that is the hypothalamus. Okay? And that is still a part of the division of the prosencephalon. Okay? So those are the structures. Okay. So, ganun ang pag-develop niya. So this one, sa drawing na ito na yung hindbrain. So with that, sa hindbrain, ang structure, ang rhombencephalon, which is the hindbrain, ito na ang magiging development niya. Magiging cerebellum, pons, and the medulla oblongata. Dito, sa example na to, dito sa brain, sa example ng brain na ito, this is an actual brain. Ito yung parte ng rhombencephalon. Yan. This is now a part of the rhombencephalon. The cerebellum, ito yung cerebellum. Okay? The cerebellum there, and the pons. This is the pons. This is the pons. This is the cerebellum. These are the parts that we call, that is developed as metencephalon. Okay? The metencephalon will now is composed now of the cerebellum and the pons. Ito yung myelencephalon, which is the medulla oblongata. Okay? Medulla oblongata. So si medulla oblongata, when it continues, it will now continue to become the spinal cord. Naintindihan niyo yung structure, guys? The development of the brain. Okay? So that is how the brain develops embryologically. Saan siya galing? Paano siya na-divide? Okay. Okay, so we're done now with the embryological divisions of the brain. Let's continue to the different structures of the forebrain or the prosencephalon. So the telencephalon, under it is the cerebrum. This is occupying 7/8 of the weight of the brain. So you see, malaki siya. So what is important is that it is responsible for discriminatory identification and integration of sensory information. Memory, reasoning is also a function, or the function of memory and reasoning is also in this part of the brain. Okay, particularly at the frontal part. This is also responsible for the use of language, emotional behavior, and initiation of movements. This is this part here, no? Sa cerebrum, yung function niya dito mismo sa cerebrum. Okay? So, the cerebrum, let us now going to find the different parts of the cerebrum using the fissures. So, when you say fissures, ito yung mga grooves, or ito yung tinatawag nating narrow opening, mga opening. So that we can identify, we can see, or we can find where the lobes are, the functions, what are the functions of these lobes, para malaman natin kung ano yung function. Kasi hindi mo naman, we cannot say na buong brain ang nagpa-function for this particular, nag-i-initiate ng this particular function. Meron siyang specific na function. Like say, for example, the frontal part, the parietal part, the temporal area of the brain, may mga different functions yan. Kaya, dapat malaman din natin kung where is the functions, where does it occupy. Okay? So, let us use the fissures to know which part, where is the temporal lobe, where is the parietal lobe, where is the frontal lobe. So, we will base it on the fissures. Okay. So let's go now to the fissures of the cerebrum. We're talking here of the cerebrum. We're talking here of the cerebrum. Okay. Longitudinal fissure. This is now dividing the cerebrum into two hemispheres. There is a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere, connected in the midline by a structure called corpus callosum. Okay. Look at this one. This is the whole cerebrum, the whole brain. The fissure in between that groove, or that narrow, long and narrow space or opening, or like a split or a crack, whatever you call it, or another term for that, or sulcus, no? In anatomy, you call it fissure or sulcus, no? It is sometimes interchanged. Depends on the book, no? But let's talk here of the fissure. Itong mga grooves na ito. Ito, the whole thing here, the whole groove there, that is what you call as longitudinal fissure. Okay? You call that opening there, yung opening na yan, you call it as longitudinal fissure. This is the right hemisphere. This is the left hemisphere of the brain. Okay? Right hemisphere, left hemisphere. The one that's fissure that is dividing them into right and left, the cerebrum, you call it longitudinal fissure. Okay. The lateral sylvian fissure. This is between the frontal and the parietal lobes above or superiorly and the temporal lobe below, yung nasa baba. So if this is the frontal lobe and this is the parietal lobe, below is the temporal lobe. That fissure, dyan, that is what you call as the lateral sylvian fissure. Yes? Okay? So, again, ang lobes na nasa ibabaw are the frontal and the parietal lobes. And the lobe below it is the temporal lobe. That fissure or that groove between those lobes, you call it lateral, from the word lateral sylvian fissure. Okay. Now, there is also a fissure that will divide now the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. If this is the frontal lobe, this is the parietal lobe, that fissure there, you call it as the central sulcus of Rolando or the Rolandic fissure. Okay? So what do you call this one? Yes, sis.
Lateral Nilvan fissure po.
That is the lateral sylvian fissure. Okay? And what is this lobe below? Malvin.
Temporal po yung nasa ilalim.
This is the temporal lobe. Okay? So ngayon, makikita mo na yung divisions. Okay? Sa taas, kung eto between the frontal, if this is the frontal lobe and this is the parietal lobe, ang fissure dyan sa gitna, yung opening, yung crack dyan, you call it the central sulcus of Rolando or Rolandic fissure. Okay? Below this two lobes, you have there, below, you have there the sylvian. The transverse fissure. This one, this is the cerebellum. This is part of the hindbrain. This is the cerebellum, and this is the cerebrum here. Yang fissure dyan sa gitna, yan ang tinatawag na transverse fissure. So, halata naman, di ba? Guys, so you can see that. The fissure that is now going to divide the occipital lobe and the parietal lobe, this is what you call as the parieto-occipital fissure. Okay? Don't confuse yourselves with the transverse fissure and the parieto-occipital fissure. Remember, the occipital lobe is a part of the cerebrum. This is the cerebrum. Nandito yung occipital lobe. Ito yung occipital lobe, guys. Okay? So that is the parieto. So between the occipital and the parietal, if this is the parietal bone, kasi ito yung fissure, so let's going to divide this one. This is the frontal, this is the parietal, and this is the temporal lobe. Ito yung occipital. So between, okay, ang difference ng transverse fissure and parieto-occipital fissure is that the transverse fissure is the one that is between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. Yan ang transverse. Ang parieto-occipital fissure, this is the whole cerebrum, and if you're going to divide it into lobes, yung fissure that is between the occipital lobe and the parietal, this is the occipital lobe, yung fissure na yan na nagdi-divide sa kanila, you call it parieto-occipital. Okay? Look at this. What do you call this fissure? This is the cerebellum. The whole thing here is the cerebrum. Just a moment. Cassandra, what do you call that part there?
Transverse po. Transverse fissure.
This is the transverse fissure. Yan yung tinatawag na transverse fissure. Okay? Because this is the one that divides or separates the cerebrum, the whole thing here is the cerebrum, and the cerebellum. Okay? So yan yung transverse. But the one that is between, okay, let me erase this. If this is the parietal lobe and this is the occipital lobe, remember it is in the cerebrum lang, no? It's the cerebrum. What is this fissure here? Okay, let me call Nicole Soriano.
Yung ano po, parieto-occipital fissure.
Very good. So that is the parieto-occipital fissure. Mule or Calroy, what is the parieto-occipital fissure? What is the parieto-occipital fissure, Calroy?
Yung nag-separate mo ng parietal tsaka
Occipital what?
lobe po.
Lobes. Very good. So you see, this is how you need to you understand it already. So these are the fissures, ito yung mga grooves. So this is now to identify saan yung parte, saan yung lobe na yon. Kaya it's very important to know where these fissures are, to find the fissures. Okay? So let's go now, continue. Okay, so now you know where the fissures are. Now, in the occipital lobe, this is the occipital lobe. In the occipital lobe, you can find there the calcarine fissure. The calcarine fissure, in this area here, ito yung fissure na yan, no? That fissure in that calcarine, in the occipital lobe, that fissure that is found in the occipital lobe, and this is the visual center. That is the visual center. You call it as the visual center in the brain. Okay? So the fissure there in the occipital lobe, found in the occipital lobe, you call it as the calcarine fissure. And the calcarine fissure in the area there, the calcarine area, that is the visual center. So remember, in the occipital lobe, the calcarine fissure, in the calcarine area, you have there the visual center. So saan na lobe makikita ang visual center? Which do you think?
Occipital lobe.
Fifth,
Occipital po.
occipital lobe. So, okay. So let's go back to, let's go now. These are the lobes, no? Ito yung lobe. You have there sa colored yan, yung green, that is the frontal. So the frontal and the parietal lobe is divided by what fissure? You call it central sulcus of Rolando. Then you have here the fissure between the parietal and the frontal lobe above and the temporal lobe below. The fissure between there, you call it as the lateral sylvian fissure. The fissure between the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe, you call it as the parieto-occipital fissure. The fissure between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, you call it transverse fissure. Okay? In the occipital lobe, you have also a fissure there at the calcarine area, call it the calcarine fissure, and the calcarine area, that is the visual center of the brain. Okay? So I think it's already very clear. So, sa laboratory nyo, alam nyo na yon. Okay, the cerebral cortex or the cerebrum is also divided into different lobes. So there are 4 or 5 lobes there are 5 lobes in the cerebrum. Namely, you have there the frontal lobe. This one. Remember, the frontal lobe is a center for motor functions. So kung ito ang frontal lobe, remember, these are for motor. Okay? Motor functions. And this all includes the cortex. No? The cortex anterior. So when you say anterior, you already know the orientation. It is in front of the central sulcus of Rolando. Anterior to the central sulcus of Rolando, and above siya sa lateral sylvian fissure. Nakuha? Okay? So again, the frontal lobe, if this is the frontal lobe here, it is anterior or in front the central sulcus of the Rolando and above the lateral sylvian fissure. So if you're going to ask, the lobe above the lateral sylvian fissure, in front or anterior to the central sulcus of Rolando, that is the frontal lobe, and this is the center. So remember, center for motor functions and personality. Because reasoning, abstract thinking is here at the frontal lobe. That is the function now. So we're talking now of the function. Okay? The next lobe, you have there the parietal lobe. Okay? This is the lobe that lies posterior. Kanina, kung ang frontal, anterior to the central sulcus of Rolando, the one that is lying posterior or at the back or sa likod ng central sulcus of Rolando, you have there the parietal lobe. Again, it is also above the sylvian fissure. So this is now the center for sensory function. Kung ang frontal motor, so remember, motor ang frontal, and personality, the parietal is for sensory functions. Okay? Let's go now to the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe lies beneath, so under the sylvian fissure. So this one, this is the temporal lobe. The whole thing here is the temporal lobe. That temporal lobe is the center for hearing and olfaction. Hearing and for smelling. Okay? So that is the function of the temporal lobe, basically. And the occipital lobe, this is the one that is lying or occupying the posterior extremity or the posterior part of the cerebral hemisphere that is behind the parieto-occipital fissure. So I've already mentioned that is where you can find the calcarine fissure, that is at the occipital lobe, and that is where you can find the visual center. Okay? When you open, when you retract the lateral sylvian fissure, you open. This is the lateral sylvian fissure, right? This is the parietal, the temporal lobe. This is the frontal, and this is the parietal. The fissure there between, you call is the lateral sylvian, di ba? If you retract the lateral sylvian fissure, what you can see there is the insula or the island of Ryle or the island of Rayleigh. Okay? So that is this structure. This is the structure inside, no? Yung nasa loob niyan, that is the island of Ryle or the insula. Okay? Okay, so let's go now to the functional areas of the cerebrum. Kanina, we were talking of lobes, di ba? So, saan doon sa lobes ang motor area? Saan doon, which lobe is the motor area? Which lobe is the sensory area? Okay. Cassandra.
Frontal lobe po.
Frontal lobe is the motor area. Remember that. The sensory area, Maria Isabel. Which is the sensory area? Chris Estrada.
Parietal lobe po.
Parietal lobe. Which is the one responsible for hearing and olfaction? Alexandre.
Temporal, ma'am.
Very good. Okay, so let us now go to the functional divisions. So we already know where the frontal lobe is. We already know where the parietal lobe is. And we also know where the fissures is, right? Alam na natin kung saan yung mga fissures na yon. So when we go to this, when we go to the functional areas, you have only to remember what is the primary motor area and how it is described, no? So itong mga ito, like this one, itong mga yan, yung mga kulay na yan, ito, these are what you call as gyrus. Yan. This is what you call as gyrus. Okay? When you say primary motor area or the precentral gyrus, this is the one that lies in the frontal lobe. Alam na natin kung saan ang frontal lobe. So from the description itself, it lies in the frontal lobe immediately anterior to the central sulcus of the Rolando. So immediately, directly, yung pinaka-gyrus doon, lies in the frontal lobe immediately anterior. Itong part immediately anterior to the central sulcus of Rolando. That is the primary motor area. So again, kapag alam mo na kung saan ang motor, alam mo na kung saan mo hahanapin ang primary motor area. If this is the central sulcus of Rolando, immediately anterior or immediately after the central sulcus of Rolando, that is the primary motor area or the pre-central, before the central. So the pre-central gyrus. So this is the one now that controls the voluntary movements in the side of the body. Like say for example, the left part of the brain controls the right movement of the body. The right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Okay? So, the primary motor area again, or precentral gyrus, lies in the frontal lobe immediately anterior to the central sulcus, and the function is it controls the voluntary movements in the side of the body. This area also, you call it as the Brodmann's area number 4. Okay? The primary motor area or the precentral gyrus, you call it also as the Brodmann's area number 4. Sino naman yan si Brodmann? When we talk of Brodmann's area, Brodmann is an anatomist who discovered these areas. Okay? He discovered the mapping of the brain. Kasi kung tutuusin mo, if you're going to analyze it, to be able to find that particular part of the brain which is going to do a specific function, hahanapin mo siya sa mapa. Parang yung brain, magmamapa ka doon. So sa kanya, si Brodmann as an anatomist and as a neurologist, he found out that the control of the voluntary movement is in this part of the brain. Okay, so alam niya. So halimbawa, there is a defect in the voluntary movement. Hindi mo siya hahanapin sa parietal. Kasi 'di ba, ang parietal is more on sensory, 'di ba? So kaya Brodmann, si Brodmann kasi ang nakaka-discover sa area na 'yon na ito palang area na 'yon, itong primary motor area na 'yon, ito pala yung responsible for the voluntary movements. Kasi siya yung nakahanap niyan, siya yung nakadiscover niyan, so kaya tinatawag niya na Brodmann. So, Brodmann's area. But because there are different parts of the brain with different function, kaya nilalagyan niya ng number. Para lang yan, pag taga Quezon City ka, Project 4, Project 8, parang ganon, sa mapping, sa brain. Ito naman, sa area, number 4 siya sa Brodmann's area. And this area is now controlling the voluntary movements. Intindihan, guys? So, this is how they identify the part of the brain which is responsible for a particular function. Okay? So, at least naintindihan nyo na. So, we go now, again, primary motor area or precentral gyrus in front of the anterior sulcus of Rolando or anterior Rolandic fissure. Brodmann's area number 4 din yan, controlling the voluntary movements in the side of the body. Let's continue. Pre-motor area. Alam natin kung saan yung motor area. Di ba? Primary motor area is this one. The pre-motor area is before the motor area. So before the motor area, you call it as the premotor area. Just remember kung para saan yan. It exerts the controlling influence over the motor area. So it ensures the orderly series of movements that is initiated, no? Or that is a function of the motor area. So parang tinutulungan niya, it is ensuring, no? It is ensuring the orderly sequence or the movements or series of movements that is initiated by the primary motor area. Prefrontal area. This is now the part of the frontal lobe that is concerned with the behavior or character and emotional state of the individual. Dito rin yung emotional state. This is also where you can find or where the concerned with foresight, abstract thinking, good judgment, dito din sa prefrontal area. And that is in the frontal lobe. So ditong area na ito. Okay? So that is the functional part of the frontal part of the brain. Okay. Kanina, you have the motor. No? Let's go now to the sensory. So saan ang sensory? It is in the parietal, di ba? So kung ang frontal more on the motor and abstract thinking, reasoning, dito naman sensory. So sensory, primary sensory, or you call it somesthetic area or post-central gyrus, or kung sa Brodmann's area yan, tinatawag natin yung Brodmann's area 312. Itong area na to, it lies behind the central sulcus of Rolando in the parietal lobe. So this is now responsible for the sensations of pain, the temperature, pressure, touch. It has also to do with the position and movement sensation, which is coming from the opposite side of the body, and they are received and interpreted in this part of the brain. Okay? At the primary sensory or somesthetic area or post-central gyrus. Brodmann's area, you call it Brodmann's area 312. And these are the functions. Okay? Basta sensory, guys, isipin nyo na parietal. Primary sensory at the parietal lobe. Motor speech area. So saan ang motor speech area? It lies inferior in the frontal gyrus of the dominant hemisphere. Okay? So the motor speech area. This is also called as the Broca's area. Aside from it is found at the Brodmann's area 44 and 45, you also call it as the Broca's area. Bakit Broca's area? Kasi Broca is the one who discovered that area. Because this area, the motor speech area, this is the one that is responsible for the production of speech. Okay? Dito sa area that is inferior to the frontal gyrus. Inferior, bali nasa ilalim siya. Yung part na yun ang responsible for speech production. And Broca found out that if this area is going to be damaged, it could produce an extreme difficulty of forming words or sentences. Mahihirapan siyang magsalita or to form that sentences or the word. And you call it as Broca's dysphasia or you call it dysphasia. Okay? You call it dysphasia. This is the difficulty of formulating words or sentences. So you call it, and because the person who found out that this condition of the brain when it is going to be injured will lead to dysphasia, that is why tinatawag din siyang Broca's area. So it has to do with the person who discovered that area. Naintindihan nyo, guys? So again, the motor speech area, this is lying inferior to the frontal gyrus. You also call it as Broca's area and the Brodmann's area 44 and 45. This is the area which is responsible for the production of speech. If this area is going to be damaged, it could lead to dysphasia. When you say dysphasia, it will be an extreme difficulty of formulating or forming words or sentences. Okay? So you call it, because it is Broca who found it out, that's why they call it as Broca's dysphasia. Okay? So that is the correlation there, clinical correlation there when there is injury or damage to that particular area. Because it is responsible.
Shit ka, yung wifi.
Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area.
Nandun sa wifi pa. Wifi, wala. See?
When there is a damage to the part here, to the sensory speech area, you call it aphasia. What is aphasia? This is a condition wherein a person can speak. There is no problem with the speech production. The problem here is understanding what is being spoken of. Okay? So halimbawa, ako nakakapagsalita ako, but if that part of my brain is damaged or injured, I talk, but I do not even understand what I am talking about. There is no sense of what I am talking about. Okay? Ikaw na nakakarinig, hindi mo rin maintindihan kung ano yung sinasabi ng taong yon. Because there is a fluent speech, but the words that is being expressed lack meaning. Senseless, there is no meaning. And you call that condition there, or that disease condition, as Wernicke's aphasia. Because Wernicke is the one that found out or discovered that once this part of the brain is injured, there will be a difficulty, or the individual will be unable to understand what is being spoken of. Halimbawa, ikaw nagsasalita ka, ako, yung nakaka-perceive, yung part na may injury yung brain, hindi ko maunawaan kung ano ang sinasabi mo. Kasi nga, injured yung brain na yon. Or kung ako nagsasalita, sinasabi ko kung ano-anong mga sinasabi ko, pero it lacks sense. Walang meaning. It lacks meaning. Okay? And you call it Wernicke's aphasia. So you call it Wernicke's aphasia. Okay? And that area, again, you call it sensory speech area, Wernicke's area, Brodmann's area 22. This is the one that is responsible for comprehension. Okay? So let's continue. The auditory or the hearing area, this is the transverse gyri of Heschel. This lies below the lateral sulcus, and this is found within the temporal lobe. So this is now the center for hearing, and this is called the Brodmann's area 41 and 42. Okay? So auditory or hearing area, transverse gyri of Heschel. So this one, ito yung transverse gyri. Yan. No? And that is inside there, in the transverse gyri. That is where you can find, within the temporal lobe, that is where you can find the center for hearing. Again, Brodmann's area, number 41 and number 42. So we know the visual area already, so we don't need to discuss that one. Kasi alam na natin kung saan siya. You only need to know the Brodmann area, and that is Brodmann's area number 17. Okay? That is the visual area around the calcarine fissure in the occipital lobe. The olfactory area is found within the temporal lobe. So olfactory and hearing is in the temporal lobe. The taste area is found above the lateral sulcus in the deep layer of the parietal lobe. Okay, so we were talking of the basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia here, these are the masses of gray matter that is embedded in the white matter of the cerebral hemisphere. So etong mga ito, dyan sa brain, that is where you can find this is composed of the caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus. So the lentiform nucleus into putamen and globus pallidus. Okay, so just a moment, guys. Just a moment. Sandali lang ha. Okay, so let's continue. So the basal ganglia, again, the basal ganglia, these are the masses of gray matter that is in the white matter. So these are, you also call it as the basal nuclei, and this is composed of the caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus. So ito yung composition ng basal ganglia. So the lentiform nucleus is further divided into two divisions, or the two structures, which is the putamen and the globus pallidus. Okay, so the basal ganglia, the importance of the basal ganglia, it has to do with the control of the motor function. So it plays a role in the motor function. That when the basal ganglia is going to be, or when the basal ganglia is injured, it could lead to uncontrolled or aimless movement. Okay? It could lead to uncontrolled or aimless movement kapag nagkakaroon ng injury yung area na iyon the structure of the brain. Okay? So what can happen? It could lead to tremor, nagkakaroon ng tremor, nagkakaroon ng mga movements which is not normal. Okay? So I think you know what tremor is, like this. Yung nagtitremor yung kamay, or some more part of the body that's producing the movement will produce the tremor, and because of the injury to the basal ganglia. Okay? So that is the clinical correlation to that. Okay, so that was the telencephalon, no? We were talking now of the telencephalon. Now let's go to the diencephalon, which is composed of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, and the subthalamus. But we will be dealing more of the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The diencephalon, the thalamus there, this is the relay center. Okay, remember, thalamus is the relay center for sensory impulses. Okay? Thalamus, relay center for sensory impulses, except for the sense of smelling. Okay? Which is coming from the peripheral receptors going to the brain. And this is the thalamus. Okay? That is the thalamus. So here, ito yung thalamus. Okay? That is the thalamus. If this is the total brain, this is where you can find the thalamus. Again, this is relay center for sensory receptions. No? So again, the thalamus. This one, this is the hypothalamus. Okay? So you can see the different parts there of the brain. When you divide the brain into two hemispheres, the inside part there, mas makikita mo yung thalamus kasi nasa loob siya. Okay? So the one that connects the two hemispheres together, para lang makita nyo guys, itong part na ito, this is what you call the corpus callosum. It connects the right and the left cerebral hemisphere. This one. And below that, inferior to that is the thalamus. Okay. So you see, this is the thalamus, and this is the hypothalamus. Okay. So the hypothalamus, this is the one that is involved in the regulation of the body temperature. It has to do with feeding activities, the biorhythm, and the emotion. Remember that the hypothalamus, this is the structure, this is the anatomic structure of the thalamus. It is near to the pituitary gland. Okay, so pituitary gland is very important. They are near to each other. The hypothalamus is the one that is controlling now the structure of the pituitary gland, the function of the pituitary gland, because the hypothalamus is also secreting some hormones that will allow the pituitary gland to function. Okay? So that is why it has to do with the biorhythm also. Okay. So let's go now. So that was the prosencephalon. So remember the telencephalon and the diencephalon, which is a part of the prosencephalon or the forebrain. Let's go now to the midbrain. The midbrain or the mesencephalon, ito yung midbrain. This is the hindbrain. Itong parte na ito, this is the midbrain. Yung parte na yan. It is connecting now the forebrain and the hindbrain, and this is the one responsible for motor coordination. So, ito yung midbrain. Itong parte na ito, this is the midbrain. This is the midbrain. Okay? And the midbrain is composed of the cerebral peduncles and the corpora quadrigemina. So if you look at this picture here, ito yon. Itong parte na ito ng brain, those are you have there the peduncles. Itong parte na yan. This is the peduncle that is found anteriorly. You call it peduncles. These are pair of cylindrical bodies, which is connecting now the forebrain with the hindbrain. So the corpora quadrigemina, which is also a part of the midbrain, this is the one that is posterior. The one that is anterior is the peduncles. The one found posteriorly is the corpora quadrigemina, which is composed of two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculi. So the two superior colliculi, the upper two, this is responsible for the visual reflexes. And the inferior colliculi, these are responsible for the auditory reflexes. Okay? So the hindbrain, so let's go now to the hindbrain, is composed of, or the rhombencephalon or the hindbrain, will now compose the cerebellum, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So the cerebellum here, this is the oval-shaped structure with a central constriction and lateral expanded portion. So the one that is, you call it as the constricted central portion, you call it as the vermis, which is a Latin word for worm. No? And this is divided into lobes by deep and distinct fissures. So maraming fissures yan. And these lobes includes the anterior lobe, which is responsible for the regulation of the muscle tone. The posterior lobe of the cerebellum, we're talking here of the cerebellum, the posterior lobe of the cerebellum, which is responsible for the regulation or coordination of the voluntary motor activity. and the flocculonodular lobe, which is concerned with the function of equilibrium, the posture, maintaining the posture of the body, the tone of the muscles, and the balance of the body. Okay, so those are the lobes of the cerebellum that are responsible for these different functions. The pons, if this is the cerebellum, the structure that is lying anterior to the cerebellum between the midbrain and the medulla, because this is the medulla here, between the midbrain, this is the midbrain, this is the medulla, between that, in front of the cerebellum, you call it the pons. Okay, this is the bridge-like structure that is consisting almost entirely of white matter. The medulla oblongata, so this one, yan. This is the medulla oblongata. This is the one that lies anterior to the cerebellum, and this is continuous with the spinal cord. Ito na yung spinal cord. At the level of the foramen magnum. Where can you find the foramen magnum? In your skeletal system, where can you find the foramen magnum? Alexandre. Anyone? Where can you find the foramen magnum? Alexandre.
Occipital bone.
Sa ano po, ma'am? Yung sa baba po ng, yung pinaka-ano po ng skull po, ma'am.
Yung hole doon.
Yung hole po dun sa skull po, ma'am.
Very good. So that hold on, at that level, that is now going to be the start of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a continuation of the medulla. Okay? So, at the level of the foramen magnum, diyan magpasa start si spinal cord. The medulla oblongata is continuous with the spinal cord. As it descends, so as the medulla oblongata descends, it will now become na spinal cord. Okay? So it is continuous with the spinal cord inferiorly, and above it is the pons. So superior to that is the medulla oblongata. Continuous with the spinal cord is the medulla oblongata. So it has a number of vital, regulatory, and reflex centers. So remember at this part here, particularly dito sa hindbrain, kasi part man yan ng hindbrain. This is a very important part kasi it has to do with the breathing. Once this part here will be injured, all these functions will be damaged. No? So breathing is also there. Regulation of the breathing is also there. Swallowing, vomiting, coughing, sneezing. These are all controlled in this part here. Okay. Let us now go to the ventricles of the brain. Remember the cerebrospinal fluid, which is produced by the ependymal cells. Remember that ependymal cells are lining these spaces that is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. And these spaces there, these are the ventricles. These are found inside the cerebral hemispheres, like the lateral ventricle. The lateral ventricle, this is where the start of the production of the cerebrospinal fluid. These are lined by ependymal cells, which produces them. Now, the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid will start now from the lateral ventricle. It goes to the third ventricle, and it will now go to the fourth ventricle before it's going to be circulated in the circulation, before it goes to the veins. So the lateral ventricle is found inside the cerebral hemisphere. It goes now, it flows now, it goes now, the CSF coming from the lateral ventricle will go to the third ventricle